we've managed to once again evade capture. We've been relocated to another room. Now, they said it was because of a leak, but I know that the people at the front desk, they're just looking out for my best interest. That they're trying to make sure they keep me safe. The guys in the black suits from FIFA, from Inverness, Caledonian Thistle, they showed up and they were trying to smuggle me away. But they can't stop the truth, right? Zealandism is my passion. You can't stop the passion. Me sitting here ranting at my computer, sometimes it's all I've got left when I'm locked in these hotel rooms for days. Keep your guesses coming on what Hidden Grounds episode we are filming, by the way, because honestly, I just think it's kind of entertaining for you to try and figure out what obscure club or national team we happen to be covering at this particular moment, because we are covering them. We started filming today, and it was very cool. We got to sit in on like some sort of tactical meeting that we really, really enjoyed. But there is a problem brewing in football that I find increasingly troubling and doesn't make sense to me. And this is going to run just completely counterintuitive to most of the stuff that I talk about when I'm making football manager tutorials. So I'm just going to need you to bear with me here. But I came upon this while I was reading about Nico Williams, right? The amazing winger for the Spanish national team opposite Lamine Yamal. Basically could be Lamine Yamal's grandpa, right? I mean, he's 22 years old. He might as well already retire. But he is a great young player at Athletic Bilbao, and Barcelona has been angling to sign him. Now, Barcelona has pulled its levers, signed a new deal with Nike, and is apparently about to go on the offensive to spin themselves into grave debt again, right? That's their goal. But Nico Williams is, by any standard, a fantastic deal. Okay, his release, like on the open market, Nico Williams would be worth over $100 million easy, but his release clause is like $55 million, which is really approachable for a 22-year-old winger, right? And it also has something that you'd like to call resale value, which is very palatable for executives that are interested in creating shareholder value. It's also very palatable for fan bases when you're signing a 22-year-old to say, well, we have the opportunity to kind of move this guy on in the future. Now, the issue for Barcelona is that Nico Williams signed a new contract in December that runs through 2027 with Athletic Bilbao. Of course, his brother plays there. And of course, Bilbao is the famous club in the world, the most famous club in the world that adheres to that kind of local boys only policy, right? They just run locals only. So it is an opportunity of unique local pride for Nico Williams to be able to play for his hometown club in that way. And it is becoming, according to sources talking to the New York Times and The Athletic, it's becoming increasingly likely that he's going to stay at Athletic Bilbao at least for another season and be able to play, because they're going to be playing in Europe, and be able to play in the Europa League with Athletic Bilbao, which is a competition they absolutely have the opportunity to win, which would, of course, make Nico and his brother Iñaki and everybody else on that team absolute legends. They'd hold another boat parade, and the internet would basically shut down because of all of the videos that were being uploaded. But what this does for Barcelona is it shifts their target, right? Because for whatever reason, Barcelona is just wildly uncomfortable with the idea of not buying somebody for a year and helping get their financial health kind of all the way back up. They can't do that. But this isn't another video where I'm going to talk about how insane Barcelona is and how the fact that they elect their presidents, and the way they elect their presidents incentivizes them to just spin the club into the ground and leave the next person to have to pick up the bag. And there's really no way for that system currently, the way that it's set up, to incentivize somebody making a good long-term decision. So in this market, Barcelona then moves on to its potential next target, which to me, there is one obvious name that should be jumping right off the page when it comes to who are you going to pick up, and that would be Dani Olmo. I mean, there were a couple of guys that if you watched Spain at the Euros, they stood out. They were the key players. They were the guys that you're like, wow, I would love to add that guy to my team. And Dani Olmo is absolutely one of those players, and he plays for RB Leipzig, which is, while a very good club in Germany, right, it is still a club that is a full step below where a team like Barcelona is at, or where the other biggest clubs in the world are hanging out at. And Dani Olmo is also Spanish, and he's playing in the German league, and he just had this big tournament with Spain. And on top of all of that, he's got this amazing release clause of just $60 million, right, which obviously sounds like a ridiculous amount of money, but for somebody of Dani Olmo's quality, that's really approachable. I mean, that's like 60% of an Antony right there that you can just buy a Dani Olmo for, and Dani Olmo is just better than Antony, right? But herein lies the issue. When you read the New York Times reporting, I'll read the way that this is this is worded. Because it's very interesting the way they kind of make this sound. They've indicated the club's chances of signing Nico Williams have reduced over the past few days. They have alternative targets lined up. Fellow Spain international Dani Olmo is top of the list, but an agreement with RB Leipzig is still far from being reached. Olmo has a 60 million euro release clause in his contract. Pay it. Pay. Why would you not just instantly pay that? I mean, Dani Olmo he's a world-class player, right? And if you watched the Euros and came away with any other takeaway, and Dani Olmo's been there for a while, by the way. There's a reason this guy's been starting for Spain for years, right? Like Dani Olmo is not he's one of the guys that was able to make the transition from that kind of a dud of a Spanish team that had some decent results at Euros and World Cups recently to this Spanish team that have now been crowned European champions again. He was one of the guys that stayed part of the difference-making group of players on the Spanish national team. He's just never really been in the full international spotlight when it comes to club level because RB Leipzig pops up in the Champions League knockouts every now and again, but they haven't even been able to involve themselves in a serious title challenge with Bayern Munich in Germany. So Dani Olmo's kind of been wallowing and toiling in silence, but it's impossible to deny the type of quality that a player like Dani Olmo has when you're watching these matches. And I'm not the only person that's going to be telling you that. And obviously there's going to be people way more educated than me about ball that are telling you that Dani Olmo's a really good player. But what is the issue with Dani Olmo? Well, the issue is that he is, 34 years old, except he's not. Dani Olmo's 26. He was born on May 7th, 1998. He just turned 26 right before the European Championships, which in the old days, we're talking about entering the prime of your career. But now, right, and this comes on the heels of something else that I had been told while we were recording an episode of the Player Manager podcast, which is the podcast I do with Julian Gressel of Inter Miami. Or we do that podcast together. I can't remember who we were interviewing, but we were interviewing somebody talking about how, this guy's been playing really well, but he's 24 or 25, and, the bigger European clubs, they just aren't looking for a player that age profile, right? They want to bring in somebody that's, 21, 22. Even though that guy that's 24, 25 could walk on the field and start for them day one. It's just a lot more palatable and a lot easier for them to sell signing the guy that's 20, 21 years old, even if he's not quite as far along. And I realize that I'm a part of this problem. Okay, I realize that, me doing the football manager thing, all I do is emphasize signing wonder kids. Once a guy's age starts with 3, you got to get him out the door, right? And in Football Manager, which is the game that I make so many tutorials about on the main channel, it's a lot about managing the economy. You sign these guys and you're able to resell them. But there was a difference between Football Manager and the real world. And I'm going to try and illustrate that to you because I got really interested in this and then went down the rabbit hole. Like, why does nobody want Dani Olmo, when statistically speaking, right, even conservatively, it is entirely possible for a player's prime to go into their early 30s. You're looking at 6, 7, maybe even 8 years of Dani Olmo playing at the exact level that he's at, if all things go well and go according to plan, right? But, sorry, I got distracted. Back to the Football Manager thing. The difference between FM and real life is if you're really good at Football Manager, you can really predict what is going to happen and what is going to happen for a player way more easily then you're able to predict that in real life. Okay, now if you look at the most expensive transfers all time, you will see this kind of, not only will you see this trend be illustrated by the fact that Enzo Fernandez is 5th, right? And if Enzo Fernandez, they didn't pay 121 million euros for who he is right now. They're paying that because he was in the midfield of a World Cup winning team and he's really young. And the same thing can be said for Moises Caicedo, and that he is playing very well, but he is also very young, right? And so you're paying this amount of money because you're projecting all of this stuff that he's going to be out there in the future, which isn't necessarily wrong, but they're also paying this amount of money because they feel comfortable that there is significant resale value in Enzo Fernandez, that there is significant resale value in Moises Caicedo. But how did that work out for Barcelona? Right? Barcelona goes out and gets Ousmane Dembele, who looks like, maybe honestly, you could comp him with Nico Williams in a lot of ways. Now, did he inspire a Euros winning campaign? No, but he was pretty close to that level when he was playing at Borussia Dortmund. In Dortmund, when they'd flipped him into a star, and then overnight Ousmane Dembele was one of the best wingers in the world. Barcelona goes and buys that player. And then what's the resale value on that? He gets hurt for a couple of years. You end up paying him a ton in wage. You spent over 100 million in order to get him into the team. But all that resale value that you thought was there just didn't end up materializing. Antony, who I invoked earlier in this rant, is another great example. If we're going to go sign a guy in his early 20s, and we're going to pay more than we probably should in order to get him, but he's got this bright future and he's got a ton of resale value. What do you think you could get for Antony on the open market right now? Be entirely honest, especially considering how much you're spending on wages in order to keep a guy like Antony going when you confirm a transfer like that in the first place. Jadon Sancho is another great example of a young player. Everything, the world seemed to be his oyster, so we're going to overpay because we got this resale value down the line and everybody's happy about it and he should just keep getting better. And then obviously everything all falls apart. The move doesn't go well. Somehow he failed the adaptability test moving back to his home country and then needed to go out on loan in order to try and recapture it and maybe regrow some of that resale value that exists. Nicola Pepe is a great example at Arsenal. You go out and sign this young, very talented, very attractive winger, and it just doesn't work out. He's just not as good as you think he is. He doesn't develop anymore, and all that resale value is just gone. You just blew the 80 million euros that you spent to get him in the first place. And all of this has led me to this kind of staunch conclusion that we have now, the pendulum, which is always swinging back and forth, right? And it's an inexact science, and you're never always going to be right when it comes to transfers. He's now swung a little too far in the direction of we need a certain age profile. In the direction of, well, we need this young guy. And in terms like resale value being introduced into these conversations, right? And being introduced into the conversations that fans are having, because that has a real impact. You want a signing that your fans can get excited about. And if somebody signs Danny Olmo, there's going to be a corner of the team saying, we're spending $60 million on a guy that's 26 years old. Would you rather do that? Or would you rather spend more money on a guy who's clearly less good right now? Right? Because that's why I think that pendulum has swung too far in one direction. Danny Olmo is a fabulous player at the highest levels that you can have. He can clearly be a guy that makes a difference. And even down to the goal line clearance that he had against England. Like, he can make a difference just in terms of his mentality, just being a competitor. And I'm not somebody that's over here riding or dying with Danny Olmo. He's just this example of kind of this glitch or this flaw in the system with where we're at right now. That people just seem to be putting so much value on the future because of the failures of certain teams, the epic failures of certain teams that tried to spend too much for the now. They're missing out on the opportunity to pick up a guy like Danny Olmo. But if you sign him and give him a 5-year contract, you're telling me that Danny Olmo in those 5 years doesn't have a damn good chance of being a great player for all those 5 years? A better chance, I would argue, than an Antony or a Jadon Sancho or even an Ousmane Dembele, because Ousmane Dembele had only proven it for 1 year at Dortmund before he ended up going to Barcelona, right? And I'm not Dembele's, grown as his muscles have stopped giving out on him. He's grown into a really good player, and I'm not saying he's not, but he wasn't for Barcelona, right? And they took a shot on him after 1 year. Well, Danny Olmo's proven it for a long time what he's capable of. Then he's not the only person that fits into this type of category. Because so much can change and so much can happen over the course of those 5 to 7 years that a player is supposed to be developing and cresting that you can sell again. That taking, the bird in the hand instead of the 2 in the bush can often be the right decision here. And in this situation, Danny Olmo's the bird in the hand. He's the amazing player isn't going to cost you $100 million. Because he costs $60 because it's a damn release clause. Now, if you're going to spend $55 million to get Nico Williams, and you can't get him, and you want to spend money, I think it should be a no-brainer that you get Danny Olmo for $60, right? And I think that there will be an opportunistic team that comes along that recognizes that bringing in some players for the present, I'm not talking about 32, 33-year-olds on really high fees or anything, but I mean, crying out loud, he just turned 26 years old. Signing these guys that are just kind of entering the prime of their career on these cut-rate deals because apparently nobody else wants to buy them might be a great way to build a winning team even faster than just exclusively signing 18 to 22-year-olds because you think that is the best prudent, financial decision. Honestly, in the climate right now, you never know how it's going to change. You can't tell me that Danny Olmo wouldn't be a prime candidate for the transfer to the Saudi League in 6 years, the same way that Kevin De Bruyne is getting lined up for that right now. And even if it's not the Saudi League, there always seems to be one giant money league that's at least willing to pick up the wage of a player like Danny Olmo down the line. But of course, if he's 29, 30 years old, you can always call up Manchester United. I mean, they bought Casemiro for like over $70 million. There's always going to be somebody you can take advantage of with those types of sales. So saying Danny Olmo doesn't even have any resale value is just kind of wrong. People just look at the age and they just go, too old. That only works in Football Manager. In real life, kind of gone too far against us. Danny Olmo, I'm in your corner. I think this is ridiculous. Chelsea, if you still had $100 million and you actually had some good negotiators that could convince these two players to play for you, would you rather have one Moises Caicedo or Nico Williams and Danny Olmo? Get back to me on that.